The CEO, who once called her worthless, stood frozen on the tarmac, as three beautiful girls in matching pink dresses ran down the jet stairs while their billionaire mother signed autographs for the crew. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The second pink line appeared on the pregnancy test, faint but unmistakable. Jasmine Wilson stared at it, her heart pounding in her small Harlem bathroom. She ran the cold water, splashed her face, and looked at herself in the mirror. 25 years old, Columbia graduate, junior analyst at Sterling and Ross Investment Bank. The face that stared back showed none of the confidence she'd carefully cultivated during presentations to senior partners. Instead, she saw only fear. "It'll be okay," she whispered to her reflection. "We'll figure this out together." She'd been dating Marcus Blackwood for 8 months, discreetly, at his insistence. The heir to Blackwood Enterprises and its newly appointed vice president had approached her at the Emerging Markets Financial Conference last spring, where she'd asked a question that challenged the keynote speaker's assumptions about microfinance in West African communities. "That was impressive," he'd said afterward, his cologne expensive, his smile practiced but genuine. Most junior analysts wouldn't have the courage to question James Morton's data publicly. "Most junior analysts haven't lived in those communities," she'd responded, remembering her summer internship in Ghana during college. Something in her directness had captivated him. She'd seen it in his eyes. Surprise, then interest. Not the usual interest she occasionally received from privileged men, the kind that felt like they were considering an exotic specimen. This seemed deeper, a recognition of intellect. Their first date had been at a small French bistro in the village. The second, a private tour of a gallery after hours. The third, his penthouse on East 57th Street. Always away from his social circles, always with the unspoken understanding that their worlds intersected but did not merge. Now, Jasmine wrapped the pregnancy test in toilet paper and tucked it into her purse. She had a dinner scheduled with Marcus tonight. She would tell him then. They were both adults. Surely they could navigate this together. The January wind cut through her coat as she emerged from the subway near his building. The doorman nodded in recognition. After 8 months, he knew her face, if not her name. "Mr. Blackwood is expecting you, miss," he said, gesturing toward the private elevator. The ride to the 47th floor gave her time to rehearse her words. She'd considered every possible approach during the day, barely able to focus on the investment reports she was supposed to be analyzing. Direct was best. Marcus appreciated clarity. The elevator opened directly into his penthouse, where floor-to-ceiling windows framed the glittering Manhattan skyline. Marcus stood at the wet bar, fixing a drink. "There you are," he said, his smile warming his patrician features. At 32, he possessed the easy confidence of someone who had never doubted his place in the world. "Scotch?" "No, thank you," Jasmine said, her throat suddenly dry. "I can't." Something in her tone made him pause, the crystal tumbler suspended halfway to his lips. "Is everything all right?" Jasmine took a deep breath. She'd faced tougher challenges than this. The daughter of a Bronx nurse who'd raised 3 children alone, she'd fought for every opportunity. The magnet school admission, the scholarship to Columbia, the coveted analyst position. She could handle this conversation. "Marcus, I'm pregnant." The silence that followed seemed to stretch across decades. His expression shifted from shock to something cooler, more calculated. He set his glass down with deliberate care. "I see," he said finally. "How long have you known?" "I just confirmed it today. I'm about 6 weeks along, I think." Marcus nodded slowly, then walked to the window, gazing out at the city as if seeking answers in the constellation of lights. When he turned back, his face had hardened into something unfamiliar. "This wasn't part of the plan, Jasmine." "I know it wasn't planned, but—" "No, you don't understand." His voice took on an edge she'd never heard before. "I have a 5-year trajectory laid out. Partnership, then political connections, then a run for state senate by 40. A child isn't in that picture. I thought we could figure this out together, Jasmine said, fighting to keep her voice steady. Marcus didn't respond immediately. Instead, he walked to his study with measured steps and returned with a checkbook. The leather cover bore the embossed Blackwood Enterprises logo. "This should resolve the situation," he said, writing with quick, efficient strokes. He tore out the check and extended it toward her. $15,000. Sufficient for a quality procedure and a month's recovery somewhere discreet. Jasmine stared at the check, unable to process what was happening. "I don't want your money," she said, her voice barely audible. "I want to have this baby." "Our baby," she added, a plea in her voice. Marcus sighed, an exasperated sound she'd heard him make during conference calls when someone was being particularly difficult. "Be realistic, Jasmine. A biracial child born out of wedlock would be disastrous for my career trajectory. Blackwood Enterprises cannot afford that kind of complication." Complication? The word felt like a slap. "This is a child we're talking about." "It's a situation that needs managing," Marcus countered, his tone cooling further. "You're a smart woman. You must have known this was temporary." The floor seemed to tilt beneath Jasmine's feet. "Temporary?" Marcus set the check on the coffee table between them. "You're a Bronx girl with a scholarship degree. Did you really think you were the type of woman who belongs in my world? It was fun while it lasted, but we both knew there was an expiration date." Each word landed like a physical blow. Jasmine felt her carefully constructed professional composure cracking, revealing the young woman from the Bronx who had spent her life proving she belonged in rooms where people like Marcus were born to stand. "I never saw an expiration date," she managed. "I saw a relationship." "That was your miscalculation," he replied, adjusting his cuffs, a nervous gesture she'd found endearing once. "I need someone appropriate for my position, someone who understands the responsibilities of the Blackwood name." "And I'm not appropriate?" The heat of anger began to replace the chill of shock. "Because I'm black? Because my mother works night shifts at Montefiore? Because I earned my spot at Columbia instead of buying it?" Marcus's expression hardened. "This emotional display is exactly my point. You don't understand how my world works." "Your world." Jasmine laughed bitterly. "The world where human beings are complications to be managed with checkbooks." "Take the money, Jasmine. Use it or don't, but this ends today." He glanced at his watch. "I have dinner with the governor's economic advisory team in an hour. I'll need to shower and change." The dismissal was so casual, so complete that Jasmine felt physically ill. 8 months of intimacy, of shared mornings and whispered plans, erased with a glance at a Swiss timepiece. "I won't take your money," she said, straightening her spine. "And I won't be disposed of like an inconvenient meeting." Marcus's patience visibly thinned. "Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. The check is there. Take it and go." "And if I have this baby? Our baby?" His expression turned glacial. "Then you'll be doing so alone, with no acknowledgement or support from me. My lawyers will ensure that any paternity claim is tied up in court until the child is in college." He stepped closer, his voice lowering. "Consider your career, Jasmine. How do you think Sterling and Ross will react to an unwed mother on their analyst track, especially one making baseless claims against a client as valuable as Blackwood Enterprises?" The threat was unmistakable. Jasmine felt her future, the one she'd worked so hard to build, tilting on its axis. "You wouldn't." "I would do whatever necessary to protect my family's legacy," he replied coolly. "Nothing personal, just business." Jasmine gathered her coat with trembling hands. "I thought I knew you. You knew what I allowed you to see." He walked to the elevator, pressing the button. "This is who I've always been." As the elevator doors opened, Marcus placed a hand on her elbow, guiding her inside with practiced courtesy. The final insult, this pretense of gentlemanly behavior. "Don't contact me again," he said quietly. "I have important commitments with important people. You were insufficient." The word hung in the air as the doors closed between them. The next morning, Jasmine arrived at work to find her security credentials deactivated. Her supervisor, a woman who had mentored her for 3 years, avoided eye contact as she explained that irregularities had been found in Jasmine's recent market analyses. "Irregularities that weren't there last week when you approved them," Jasmine said, watching understanding dawn in her supervisor's eyes. "I'm sorry, Jasmine. The directive came from above. There's nothing I can do." By the end of January, Jasmine's carefully cultivated emergency fund was dwindling. Rent in Harlem, even in her modest studio, consumed nearly 60% of her savings each month. Job interviews that had seemed promising mysteriously cooled after reference checks. The Blackwood reach was longer than she'd imagined. In February, she sold her professional wardrobe piece by piece, keeping only what might fit an expanding waistline. By March, she was working as a receptionist at a law firm, her finance degree and analyst experience dismissed as overqualification concerns. At night, she took on freelance data entry projects, her fingers flying over the keyboard until her vision blurred. On weekends, she stood for 8-hour shifts at a department store in Brooklyn, smiling through nausea and backaches to earn commission on cosmetic sales. In April, during her 5th month, she sat quietly in a community clinic as the ultrasound technician frowned, adjusted the wand, then called for a doctor. "Is something wrong?" Jasmine asked, fear clutching at her throat. The doctor studied the screen, then turned to her with an unexpected smile. "Not wrong, Ms. Wilson. Just unusual. You're carrying triplets." Triplets? The word felt foreign on her tongue. 3 heartbeats, all strong and healthy, the doctor confirmed. "Though this does classify your pregnancy as high risk, you'll need additional monitoring and rest." Rest. The word was almost laughable. Between 3 jobs and barely 5 hours of sleep a night, rest was a luxury as unattainable as Marcus Blackwood's world had proven to be. That night, in the public library where she'd been researching alternative career paths after her shift, Jasmine's vision tunneled to darkness. She was vaguely aware of papers fluttering to the floor, of someone calling for help, and then nothing. When she regained consciousness, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked dark hair was kneeling beside her, holding Jasmine's wrist to check her pulse. "There you are," the woman said, relief evident in her refined voice. "You gave us quite a scare. The paramedics are on their way." "No ambulance," Jasmine managed, struggling to sit up. "I can't afford—" "Shh," the woman soothed, helping her to a chair. "You're pregnant and you fainted. This isn't negotiable." Something in the woman's tone, authoritative but kind, reminded Jasmine of her mother. She stopped protesting. "I'm Eleanor Johnson," the woman said, gathering Jasmine's scattered papers. Her eyes caught on a resume. "Columbia Business School? Finance concentration?" Jasmine nodded weakly. "And you're working as a receptionist and sales associate?" Eleanor's eyebrows rose. "That seems like a significant underutilization of your education." "It's complicated," Jasmine replied. Eleanor studied her face, understanding dawning in her eyes. "Ah, the pregnancy, among other things." The paramedics arrived then, checking Jasmine's vitals and insisting she go to the hospital for monitoring. As they helped her onto the stretcher, Eleanor pressed a business card into her hand. "Call me when you're released," she said firmly. "My agency needs someone with your background. It's an internship position, but it could grow." Jasmine stared at the card. "Eleanor Johnson, Executive Director, Johnson Media Partners. Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Eleanor's smile held a history of its own battles. "Let's just say I recognize the look of a woman fighting against odds that were stacked without her consent. I was a single mother too once." As the Manhattan skyline glittered indifferently to her pain, Jasmine could never have imagined that 15 years later, Her name would be illuminated on those same skyscrapers when her empire would surpass the value of the company that had tried to destroy her. Eleanor's business card seemed to burn in Jasmine's palm as the paramedics wheeled her into the emergency room. The harsh, fluorescent lights made her squint, a stark contrast to the soft glow of the library where she had collapsed just 30 minutes before. This wasn't how her life was supposed to unfold. Pregnant with triplets, abandoned, and now being rushed to the hospital after fainting from exhaustion. "Blood pressure's low," a paramedic informed the triage nurse. "Patient is approximately 20 weeks pregnant with triplets, reported dizziness before loss of consciousness." Jasmine wanted to correct him. 22 weeks, not 20, but fatigue kept her silent. She'd been counting each day, each small victory of keeping herself employed, housed, and somehow moving forward despite everything. 3 hours later, after IV fluids and stern warnings from an overworked but kind obstetrician, Jasmine was discharged with instructions that seemed impossible to follow: more rest, better nutrition, reduced stress, and frequent prenatal checkups. "You're carrying 3 lives besides your own," the doctor had emphasized, looking over reading glasses at Jasmine's gaunt face. "Your body is working triple overtime. You need to respect its limitations." The irony wasn't lost on her as she stepped into the pre-dawn chill, her discharge papers clutched in one hand, Eleanor Johnson's business card in the other. Respect limitations. It seemed that's all her life had become, a series of limitations closing in, narrowing her future to a pinpoint. Her apartment felt smaller than ever when she returned, the walls of her studio closing in like a trap. She had exactly 4 hours before she needed to be at the reception desk of Goldstein and Partners. 4 precious hours to shower, change, and maybe, if she was lucky, catch a brief nap before returning to the hamster wheel of survival. The alarm pierced through her consciousness at 5:30, dragging her from a dreamless sleep. Jasmine's body protested as she forced herself upright, her expanding midsection now prominently visible beneath her nightshirt. She placed both hands on her belly, feeling the gentle flutters that had recently begun, her daughters making their presence known. "Good morning, little ones," she whispered, a ritual she'd begun weeks ago. "We're going to make it through another day. I promise." The promise felt hollow as she struggled into her increasingly tight work clothes, the waistband of her skirt digging uncomfortably into her skin. She'd need to visit a thrift store soon for maternity clothes, another expense she could barely afford. By 6:45, Jasmine was seated behind the gleaming reception desk at Goldstein and Partners, answering calls with a professional tone that belied her exhaustion. "Good morning, Goldstein and Partners. How may I direct your call?" The senior partner, a woman in her 60s with immaculately coiffed silver hair, paused by the desk mid-morning. Her eyes lingered on Jasmine's midsection, lips pursing slightly. "Ms. Wilson, may I have a word?" The private office was intimidating, corner views of Manhattan, law degrees from Harvard and Yale adorning the walls, leather-bound books lining custom shelves. "Your condition has progressed since your hiring," Ms. Goldstein began, selecting her words with lawyerly precision. "I disclosed my pregnancy during the interview," Jasmine replied carefully. "Yes, a pregnancy. Singular. I understand you're expecting triplets?" Her tone made it sound like an accusation rather than a medical reality. "I am. The concern, Ms. Wilson, is your ability to fulfill your duties. Our clients expect a certain presentation when they enter our offices. Moreover, I've noticed you've needed to use the restroom with increasing frequency." The humiliation burned in Jasmine's chest. "I apologize if my basic biological needs have inconvenienced the firm." Ms. Goldstein's expression hardened. "There's no need for attitude. I'm simply explaining why we've decided to hire a temporary replacement for the remainder of your situation. You're firing me for being pregnant. We're releasing you from your probationary period due to attendance concerns. Your final paycheck will include 2 weeks severance, more than legally required." By noon, Jasmine was back on the street, a small box containing her desk plant and framed Columbia diploma tucked under her arm. Another job gone, another setback. That night, after forcing herself through a 4-hour shift of data entry that made her fingers cramp and her eyes burn, Jasmine finally allowed herself to look at Eleanor Johnson's card again. What did she have to lose? The receptionist job was gone. The department store had already cut her hours, claiming sales were down. The freelance work barely covered groceries. The call went to voicemail. Jasmine left a message, her voice carefully modulated to hide her desperation. Eleanor called back the next morning. "I was wondering when I'd hear from you," she said, no preamble necessary. "Can you come to my office today? 3 o'clock? Johnson Media Partners occupied a modest suite in a converted loft building in Chelsea. Nothing like the gleaming corporate towers where Jasmine had once worked, but warm and vibrant with colorful modern art and open workspaces. Eleanor greeted her personally, leading her to a small conference room where tea and sandwiches waited. "Eat first," she insisted, gesturing to the food. "Then we'll talk." Jasmine hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first bite hit her tongue. She'd been rationing her meals, prioritizing prenatal vitamins over proper nutrition for herself. "When are you due?" Eleanor asked, watching as Jasmine finished her first sandwich and hesitantly reached for a second. "Early August, according to the doctor. But with triplets, they'll likely come early." "Triplets." Eleanor shook her head, impressed. "You don't do anything halfway, do you?" The unexpected humor startled a laugh from Jasmine. "Apparently not. Tell me about your situation. The real situation, not the sanitized version you'd give in a normal interview. Perhaps it was exhaustion, or perhaps it was Eleanor's direct but compassionate approach. But Jasmine found herself telling the truth about Marcus, about the pregnancy, about the systematic dismantling of her career following his rejection. "He offered me $15,000 to resolve the problem," Jasmine concluded, the memory still raw. "When I refused, he made sure I'd regret it." Eleanor's expression had hardened as the story unfolded. "Blackwood Enterprises. I should have known. That family has a reputation for solving problems with checkbooks and threats. You know them?" "I've been in media and advertising for 25 years. Everyone knows the Blackwoods. Old money, older ethics, meaning none." Eleanor leaned forward. "But enough about them. Let's talk about you and what happens next." The internship offer was modest but realistic. 25 hours per week, flexible scheduling, focused on digital marketing analytics for Eleanor's small but growing agency. The pay was barely more than Jasmine's receptionist salary, but the hours were manageable, and the work would actually utilize her education. "It's not what you're worth," Eleanor acknowledged, "but it's what I can offer right now. The potential for growth is real." Tears threatened, and Jasmine fought them back. "Why are you helping me?" Eleanor's expression softened. 23 years ago, I was pregnant, alone, and shut out of my industry by a powerful man who decided I was disposable. Someone gave me a chance when I needed it. I'm simply paying it forward." By early July, Jasmine's body had transformed into something she barely recognized. Her once flat stomach now extended dramatically, housing 3 growing babies who seemed to dance and tumble constantly. The summer heat was brutal, her ankles swollen, her back aching with each step. Yet working for Eleanor provided something her other jobs hadn't: dignity and purpose. The contractions began at 4:17 on a Tuesday morning, nearly 6 weeks before her due date. Jasmine's first thought was denial. It was too early, she wasn't ready. Her second thought was panic. She was alone. With shaking hands, she called Eleanor, who answered on the first ring despite the hour. "I'll be there in 15 minutes, she said without hesitation. "Don't move." The next 12 hours passed in a blur of pain, fear, and medical urgency. Words like preeclampsia and emergency C-section floated above Jasmine as doctors made rapid decisions. Eleanor remained a steady presence, advocating when Jasmine couldn't, holding her hand when the epidural was administered, promising that everything would be all right even when the monitors beeped ominously. When Jasmine woke in recovery, Eleanor was still there, her face lined with fatigue but smiling. "They're here," she said simply. "3 tiny but perfect girls." "Are they?" Jasmine's throat was dry, her voice cracking. "They're fighters, just like their mother. 4 pounds each, give or take an ounce. They're in the NICU, but the doctors are cautiously optimistic." It was 3 days before Jasmine could sit in a wheelchair beside the 3 incubators, her body still recovering from major surgery, her heart aching with a love so fierce it frightened her. Each tiny girl, identical in their perfection, was connected to monitors and tubes, their translucent skin revealing blue veins, their miniature chests rising and falling with each precious breath. "Hello, my darlings," she whispered, fingertips pressed against the plastic that separated her from her daughters. "I'm your mom." The NICU nurse, a kind-eyed woman with gray-streaked braids, adjusted one of the monitors. "They're doing remarkably well for 34-weekers, especially triplets. You've got strong little ladies here." Jasmine nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Strong. They needed to be. The world wouldn't make things easy for them. 3 black baby girls with no father, born to a single mother who was barely keeping herself afloat. As if reading her thoughts, Eleanor placed a gentle hand on Jasmine's shoulder. "You're not alone in this. I've already converted my home office into a nursery for when they're discharged. You'll stay with me until you're back on your feet." "I can't accept." "You can, and you will," Eleanor interrupted firmly. "This isn't charity. It's humanity." That night, after Eleanor had gone home to prepare the nursery, Jasmine remained beside the incubators. The NICU was quiet, the overhead lights dimmed, only the soft beeping of monitors and occasional whisper of nurses breaking the silence. She placed one hand on each incubator, forming a connection between all 3 of her daughters. "You never have to know what it feels like to be called insufficient," she whispered, the promise fierce and binding. "I will build a world where you are indispensable, unquestionable, and irreplaceable. And someday, I'll show the man who rejected us the biggest mistake he ever made." The monitors beeped steadily in response, 3 separate rhythms somehow forming a unified promise of their own. As the night deepened around them, Jasmine didn't see the 3 fragile infants fighting for stability. She saw 3 future forces of nature, already gathering their strength. While watching her 3 tiny daughters sleeping peacefully in their incubators, Jasmine couldn't imagine that these same girls would one day be recognized as prodigies in their fields, causing a sensation when they entered a ballroom alongside their billionaire mother. The first contraction hit like a lightning bolt through Jasmine's lower back, yanking her from restless sleep. She glanced at the bedside clock. 4:17 in the morning. Too early. Much too early. "No, no, no," she whispered, placing protective hands over her enormous belly. "Not yet, little ones. We need more time." She breathed deeply, counting seconds, hoping it was just Braxton Hicks, the false contractions she'd experienced occasionally over the past few weeks. But 6 minutes later, another wave crashed through her, stronger than the first. The reality sank in. Her daughters were coming, ready or not, 6 weeks before their due date. With trembling fingers, Jasmine reached for her phone. There was only one person she could call. Eleanor answered immediately, her voice alert despite the hour. "Jasmine? What's wrong?" "The babies—" A third contraction cut off her words, bringing unexpected tears. "They're coming. I'm scared, Eleanor." "I'll be there in 15 minutes, Eleanor replied without hesitation. "Don't move." While waiting, Jasmine packed her hospital bag with mechanical movements, the tiny newborn clothes she'd purchased secondhand, toiletries, the single stuffed lamb she'd splurged on, hoping her daughters could share. Reality was setting in with each passing minute. She was about to become a mother to 3 infants, alone. Eleanor arrived in record time, her silver-streaked hair hastily pulled back, wearing mismatched shoes in her rush. She assessed Jasmine with calm efficiency. "How far apart are the contractions?" 5 minutes now, getting stronger. Jasmine gripped the doorframe as another spasm tightened her abdomen. The taxi ride to Mount Sinai Hospital was a blur of pain and fear. Eleanor made calls, her voice authoritative as she arranged for Jasmine's obstetrician to meet them. "Everything will be fine," she assured Jasmine, squeezing her hand. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time." "Not triplets," Jasmine managed between contractions. "Not alone." "You're not alone," Eleanor corrected firmly. "I'm right here." The emergency room was chaos. Bright lights, shouted medical terminology, the cold shock of a wheelchair beneath her. A nurse took her blood pressure and frowned. 160/95, she reported to a doctor who had materialized beside Jasmine. "Protein in the urine from her last checkup." "Preeclampsia," the doctor muttered, shining a light into Jasmine's eyes. "We need to move quickly. Prep for emergency C-section." "What's happening?" Jasmine asked, panic rising as they began wheeling her away from Eleanor. "Your blood pressure is dangerously high," the doctor explained, walking alongside the gurney. "It's putting you and the babies at risk. We need to deliver now." Eleanor jogged to keep up, still holding Jasmine's hand. "I'll be right outside the operating room. You're going to be fine, all 4 of you." The operating room was a sterile blur of masked faces and institutional green. The anesthesiologist explained the epidural procedure with practiced calm while a nurse prepped Jasmine's abdomen. The needle in her spine was a strange pressure rather than pain, and soon a blessed numbness spread through her lower body. "Can you feel this?" the doctor asked, pressing something against her foot. "No," Jasmine replied, suddenly terrified by her immobility. "That's perfect. We're ready to begin." The procedure itself was a surreal experience. Pressure without pain, the medical team's voices muffled as though underwater, the strange detachment of being awake while they cut into her body. Jasmine fixed her gaze on the blue surgical drape that blocked her view, trying to focus on her breathing rather than the tugging sensations in her abdomen. "Here comes baby number 1, the doctor announced. There was a moment of suspended time, then a tiny, indignant cry pierced the operating room, high-pitched but unmistakably strong. "Girl, as expected," the doctor confirmed. 4 pounds, 2 ounces. Tears streamed down Jasmine's face as they briefly held the tiny, wrinkled infant above the drape, a fleeting glimpse of dark hair and flailing limbs before she was whisked away to waiting NICU staff. "Baby number 2 coming." Another cry, slightly softer than the first. Another girl, 4 pounds exactly. The third delivery followed quickly, her smallest daughter at 3 pounds 15 ounces, her cry more of a kitten's mewl than her sister's protests. "They all look good for 34 weekers, the neonatologist announced from somewhere across the room. "We're taking them to NICU for standard preemie protocols." "Can I?" Jasmine started, reaching weakly. "You'll see them soon," the nurse promised, patting her shoulder. "Let's get you closed up and into recovery first." The world faded then, anesthesia and exhaustion pulling Jasmine under despite her efforts to stay conscious. Her last thought before darkness claimed her was that she hadn't even held them, hadn't welcomed her daughters properly into the world. She woke disoriented in recovery, the harsh fluorescent lights making her wince. Eleanor was there, looking tired, but smiling. "They're here," she said simply. 3 tiny but perfect girls. Jasmine tried to speak, but her throat was parched, her voice emerging as a croak. "They're fighters, just like their mother," Eleanor reassured her. 4 pounds each, give or take an ounce. They're in the NICU, but the doctors are cautiously optimistic. Relief washed through Jasmine, followed immediately by frustration. "I want to see them." "As soon as you're stable," Eleanor promised. "Your blood pressure is still concerning them." It was 3 agonizing days before Jasmine was deemed well enough to visit the NICU. A nurse helped her into a wheelchair, mindful of her surgical incision, and Eleanor walked beside them as they navigated hospital corridors. The NICU was quieter than Jasmine had expected, a hushed sanctuary of beeping monitors and whispered conversations. The 3 incubators were positioned side by side, each containing a tiny miracle wrapped in hospital blankets, connected to monitors and feeding tubes. "Here are your daughters, Ms. Wilson," the NICU nurse said gently, positioning Jasmine's wheelchair between the incubators. Jasmine stared in wonder at the 3 identical faces, so small, so perfect, each with a cap of dark hair and delicate features that somehow already reminded her of Marcus. The thought brought both pain and defiance. They had his aristocratic nose but her full lips, his long fingers but her determined chin. "Hello, my darlings," she whispered, pressing her fingertips against the plastic that separated her from her children. "I'm your mom." The nurse, a kind-eyed woman with gray-streaked braids, adjusted one of the monitors. "They're doing remarkably well for 34-weekers, especially triplets. You've got strong little ladies here." Jasmine nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Strong. They needed to be. The world wouldn't make things easy for them. 3 black baby girls with no father, born to a single mother who was barely keeping herself afloat. Eleanor seemed to read her thoughts, placing a gentle hand on Jasmine's shoulder. "You're not alone in this. I've already converted my home office into a nursery for when they're discharged. You'll stay with me until you're back on your feet." "I can't accept—" "You can, and you will," Eleanor interrupted firmly. "This isn't charity, it's humanity." The next week passed in a blur of hospital visits, recovery pain, and learning the rhythms of the NICU. Jasmine was discharged, moving reluctantly into Eleanor's spacious Brooklyn brownstone while her daughters remained hospitalized. Each morning, she took the subway to Mount Sinai, spending hours beside the incubators, reading to her daughters, singing softly, and finally, gloriously, being allowed to hold each tiny girl against her chest in the nurturing kangaroo care that helped premature infants thrive. It was during these quiet moments of skin-to-skin contact that Jasmine began to know her daughters as individuals. Though identical in appearance, their personalities emerged in subtle ways. The way one squirmed vigorously while another lay peacefully, how the third always seemed to calm instantly when Jasmine spoke. 2 weeks after their birth, as Jasmine sat in the rocking chair cradling her youngest daughter, the question of names could no longer be postponed. "They need their identities," the charge nurse reminded her gently, "for medical records, if nothing else." That night, after Eleanor had gone home to prepare the nursery, Jasmine remained beside the incubators. The NICU was quiet, the overhead lights dimmed, only the soft beeping of monitors and occasional whisper of nurses breaking the silence. She placed one hand on each incubator, forming a connection between all 3 of her daughters. "You never have to know what it feels like to be called insufficient," she whispered, the promise fierce and binding. "I will build a world where you are indispensable, unquestionable, and irreplaceable. And someday, I'll show the man who rejected us the biggest mistake he ever made." The names came to her then, clear and perfect, legacies she wanted her daughters to inherit. "Zora," she said to the firstborn, the most active of the 3, after Zora Neale Hurston, who never diminished herself to make others comfortable, who said, "No, I do not weep at the world. I am too busy sharpening my oyster knife." To the second, the observer who seemed to take in everything with wide, contemplative eyes. Maya, after Maya Angelou, whose voice rose after silence, who taught us that courage is the most important virtue because without it, we cannot practice any other virtue consistently. And to the third, her smallest fighter. Audrey, after Audre Lorde, who transformed pain into power and wrote, "When I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in the service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I am afraid." 3 women who had changed the world with their words, their courage, their refusal to be silenced or made small. 3 legacies for her daughters to grow into. The NICU nurses helped make it official the next morning. printing delicate name cards for each incubator. Zora Wilson, Maya Wilson, Audrey Wilson. "Beautiful names," the charge nurse commented. "Strong names." "They'll need to be strong," Jasmine replied. The weeks that followed were a gradual progression of milestones. First, the removal of breathing assistants, then feeding tubes, then finally, after 42 days in the NICU, the magical words, "They're ready to go home." Eleanor had transformed her brownstone's third-floor home office into a nursery, painted a soft mint green with 3 matching cribs arranged in a semicircle. A rocking chair stood by the window, and a changing table stocked with diapers tiny enough for dolls waited nearby. "It's perfect," Jasmine whispered, tears threatening again. They seemed to come so easily since the birth. "It's temporary," Eleanor corrected. "A starting point. You'll build something much better for them as they grow." That night, with all 3 girls finally home and sleeping in their cribs, Jasmine stood in the doorway watching their tiny chests rise and fall. They were still fragile, still requiring around-the-clock care, but they had survived their precarious entry into the world. "We did it, little ones," she whispered. "The hardest part is over." But as she closed the door softly, leaving it ajar to hear them, Jasmine knew she was lying to herself. The hardest part wasn't over, it was just beginning. 3 babies, no father, a career in shambles, and a world that would judge them at every turn. She would need to be as strong as the women she'd named her daughters after. Stronger, even. While watching her 3 tiny daughters sleeping peacefully in their cribs, Jasmine couldn't imagine that these same girls would one day be recognized as prodigies in their fields, causing a sensation when they entered a ballroom alongside their billionaire mother. The chime of the alarm clock at 4 in the morning sounded like an act of cruelty. Jasmine's eyes opened, heavy with exhaustion, as the 3-month-old monitor beside her bed captured the first whimpers from the nursery. For a moment, she lay still, gathering strength from reserves that seemed increasingly depleted. 5 minutes. She just needed 5 more minutes. But Zora's whimpers turned to full-throated cries, and within seconds, Maya and Audrey joined the chorus. 3 babies, 3 different hunger schedules that somehow always managed to synchronize at the most punishing hours. "Coming, sweethearts," Jasmine whispered, forcing her body upright. Her muscles ached from the constant lifting, feeding, changing. The doctor had cleared her C-section incision weeks ago, but the phantom pain remained, a ghostly reminder of their traumatic entry into the world. She patted across the hallway to the nursery Eleanor had created. In the soft glow of the night light, 3 identical faces turned toward her, tiny fists waving in urgent demand. Zora, always the ringleader, had worked herself into a proper rage, her face scrunched and reddened with effort. "I hear you. I hear all of you," Jasmine murmured, lifting Zora first, then positioning her to nurse while simultaneously reaching for Audrey, the smallest, who could wait the least. Maya would forgive the extra minute of hunger. She always did. The mechanics of feeding triplets alone in the pre-dawn darkness had become a choreography Jasmine perfected through necessity. Breastfeeding 2 while keeping the third soothed with a gentle foot rocking their bouncer. Positions rotated with military precision until all 3 were satisfied. By 6:30, as the first light of dawn filtered through the nursery blinds, Jasmine had fed, changed, and dressed all 3 girls in the color-coded onesies that helped Eleanor and the occasional babysitter tell them apart, Zora in purple, Maya in green, Audrey in yellow. Her own appearance was an afterthought, hair hastily pulled back, yesterday's blouse retrieved from the laundry pile, under-eye circles that no drugstore concealer could hope to disguise. "You look like you could use this," Eleanor said, appearing in the doorway with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. At 52, Eleanor moved through early mornings with the practiced ease of someone who had battled similar exhaustion decades earlier. "You're an angel," Jasmine replied, accepting the mug with reverence. "I have that presentation for the boutique hotel client at 10. "I know. That's why I'm taking the morning shift with the girls. You need to be sharp today." Jasmine hesitated, guilt warring with necessity. 3 months of living in Eleanor's brownstone, 3 months of accepting help that she could never adequately repay. Reading her expression, Eleanor shook her head firmly. "Stop that. Your success is my success. The agency needs this client, and you're our secret weapon." The Johnson Media Partners office hummed with quiet industry when Jasmine arrived at 9:15. What had begun as a modest internship had evolved rapidly as Eleanor recognized Jasmine's talent for digital analytics and strategic planning. The tiny agency specialized in boutique hospitality and luxury retail, niches that had weathered the economic downturn reasonably well. "Morning, Jasmine," called Tara, the 20-something receptionist who doubled as a graphic designer. "How are the triplets?" "Growing too fast," Jasmine replied with the automatic smile of a parent asked about their children. "All 3 held their heads up during tummy time yesterday." "That's advanced for 3 months, isn't it?" "They're determined to defy expectations," Jasmine said, the pride in her voice unmistakable. Her daughters were already exceptional, already proving themselves worthy of their powerful namesakes. The morning presentation went flawlessly. The boutique hotel chain signed on for a 6-month contract, impressed by Jasmine's analysis of their current digital footprint and her strategic recommendations for targeting higher-spending clientele. "You have a remarkable understanding of luxury psychology for someone so young," the marketing director commented, unaware of the irony. Jasmine had spent 8 months immersed in Marcus Blackwood's world, studying the wealthy and privileged with the careful attention of an anthropologist. Back at her desk, adrenaline still flowing from the successful pitch, Jasmine opened her laptop and returned to the project that consumed her evening hours after the triplets were asleep. She had noticed a pattern in the market research data. Small businesses owned by minorities were being systematically underserved by major marketing agencies. Their digital presence was often rudimentary, their social media strategies non-existent, and their potential customer base untapped. As she compiled her findings into a presentation, Eleanor appeared at her cubicle. "The hotel chain just called. They want to add their sister properties to the contract." Jasmine looked up, momentarily disoriented as she shifted mental gears. That's 3 additional boutique hotels. We don't have the staff to handle that volume." "Then we'll hire," Eleanor said simply. "Your commission on this should help with the girls' expenses." That evening, as Jasmine sat on Eleanor's living room floor surrounded by 3 babies on their playmats, she gathered her courage. "I need to talk to you about something." Eleanor looked up from her magazine. "You sound serious." "I've been doing research." Jasmine reached for her laptop, balancing it on her knees while keeping one hand free to reposition Audrey, who had rolled dangerously close to the coffee table. "There's a massive untapped market for digital marketing services specifically tailored to minority-owned businesses." Eleanor's eyebrows rose with interest. "Go on." "These businesses are ignored by larger agencies who don't understand their customer base or their challenges, but they're growing sectors, especially in urban areas." Jasmine pulled up her presentation, the passion in her voice building. "They need targeted strategies that the big firms aren't providing." "And you want to fill that gap," Eleanor concluded, studying Jasmine's face. "I do. I've been drafting a business plan at night. A digital marketing agency focused exclusively on minority-owned enterprises." Jasmine swallowed hard. "I understand if this feels like a betrayal after everything you've done for me, but—" "Stop right there," Eleanor interrupted, setting aside her magazine. "First, nothing you do to secure your daughter's future could ever be considered a betrayal. Second, this is exactly what I expected from you." "It is?" Eleanor smiled. "Jasmine, you're not meant to be someone's employee forever. You have founder energy. I've known it since the day we met." Relief flooded through Jasmine. "I don't even know where to start. I have the plan, but no capital, no clients." "I have a proposition," Eleanor said, leaning forward. "I'll lend you $25,000 as seed money, enough to register the business, build a proper website, and create some initial marketing materials. In exchange, You'll continue working for me part-time for the first year while you build your client base." Jasmine stared, speechless. "This isn't charity," Eleanor continued firmly. "It's investment. I believe in your vision." The next morning, Zora took her first steps. Jasmine had positioned her beside the couch, turned to grab her phone to record the moment, and turned back to find her firstborn wobbling determinedly toward her. Maya and Audrey, not to be outdone, followed suit within hours, as if they had made a secret pact to reach this milestone together. Eleanor captured the moment on video. 3 tiny girls in their color-coded outfits, taking tentative steps toward their mother, who knelt on the floor with tears streaming down her face, arms outstretched to receive them. "That's it, my brave girls," Jasmine encouraged, voice thick with emotion. "You can do anything." Later that night, after the triplets were asleep, Jasmine sat at Eleanor's dining room table with her laptop open, the blank document cursor blinking with possibility. The words, "Wilson Digital, Business Plan," appeared at the top of the page. Beneath it, she typed with growing confidence, "Mission Statement: to provide strategic digital marketing services to minority-owned businesses, empowering economic growth in underserved communities through targeted online presence and brand development." The work consumed her. During days at Eleanor's agency and evenings with the triplets, ideas for Wilson Digital percolated. Nights became her sacred creative time, the precious hours between the girls' bedtime and her own collapse into exhausted sleep. By the time the triplets turned 2, Jasmine had registered Wilson Digital as an LLC, created a professional website, and secured her first client, Ms. Odetta's Hair Sanctuary, a Black-owned salon in Bed-Stuy that had operated on word of mouth for 20 years. "I don't know nothing about computers and all that Instagram business," Ms. Odetta had said skeptically during their first meeting. "But my niece says we need it and she trusts you, so let's give it a shot." That first campaign, modest in scope but meticulously executed, increased Ms. Odetta's new client bookings by 32% in the first month. The testimonial became Jasmine's most effective selling tool, opening doors to 3 more local businesses. The dining room table became Jasmine's makeshift office, laptop surrounded by colored markers and building blocks as the triplets played nearby. Their vocabulary expanded exponentially, with Audrey speaking in complete sentences by 22 months, Maya singing complex melodies she created herself, and Zora dismantling and reassembling every toy with moving parts. "Mama working," Zora would announce solemnly, patting Jasmine's arm when she saw her at the computer. "Mama always working," Maya would echo, somehow making it sound like a song. "Mama building something important," Audrey would correct them both, her pronunciation eerily perfect. The schedule was punishing. After full days at Eleanor's agency, Jasmine would pick up the girls from daycare, manage dinner, bath time, and bedtime routines, then open her laptop to work on Wilson Digital projects until her eyes burned. 4 hours of sleep became the norm, a luxury on good nights, an aspiration on bad ones. There were moments of doubt, usually in the darkest hours before dawn, when Jasmine would find herself crying in the bathroom, wondering if she could sustain this pace, if she was failing her daughters by dividing her attention, if the dream of building something meaningful was worth the present sacrifice. Then morning would come, and with it 3 pairs of identical arms reaching for her, 3 voices calling her name with absolute confidence that she would respond, 3 sets of eyes that looked at her as though she were the center of their universe. In those moments, failure wasn't an option. "We can do this," she would whisper to herself in the mirror, echoing the words she spoke to her daughters daily. "We are indispensable, unquestionable, irreplaceable." On the day Wilson Digital signed its 5th client, Jasmine happened to glance at the television in Eleanor's office. There was Marcus Blackwood, immaculate in a bespoke suit, announcing a major expansion of Blackwood Enterprises into international markets. "The future of business is built by people who know their value," he declared to the reporters, his practiced smile never reaching his eyes. Jasmine felt a familiar pain, quickly replaced by renewed determination. He had deemed her insufficient, disposable. Every client she signed, every milestone her daughters reached, was a refutation of that judgment. One day, she promised herself, turning away from his image, "We'll be exactly where you are, Marcus, and you'll see exactly what you threw away." While observing her daughters of 2 years sleeping peacefully after another exhausting day, Jasmine didn't imagine that her small company started on a dining room table would become, in a decade, the media conglomerate that would revolutionize how the world viewed women like her. Jasmine stared at her computer screen, watching the metrics for Glow Up Cosmetics' new campaign update in real time. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, and the small office she'd rented in a converted warehouse space in Brooklyn felt both claustrophobic and liberating. 3 years had passed since she'd founded Wilson Digital at Eleanor's dining room table, and while success had been steady, it had also been modest, until tonight. "Come on," she whispered, refreshing the analytics dashboard. The campaign had launched 12 hours ago, a bold, unapologetic series of videos featuring women of various skin tones applying Glow Up's new foundation line. The tagline was simple but revolutionary: "Because your skin deserves better than an afterthought." The refresh revealed numbers that made her breath catch. Engagement rates had tripled in the last hour alone. Comments were flooding in across platforms, and the sharing metrics were climbing exponentially. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tamika Washington, Glow Up's founder and CEO. "Are you seeing this? What's happening?" Jasmine typed back quickly. "It's going viral. Don't sleep. This could be big." She hadn't expected this level of response. Glow Up was a small, Black-owned cosmetics company operating out of a storefront in Harlem, with products previously available only in-store and through a bare-bones website. Their budget for this campaign had been minuscule compared to what major brands spent on a single Instagram post. But Jasmine had seen something in their product line that bigger agencies had missed: authenticity and formulations actually designed for diverse skin tones, not merely adapted as an afterthought from products developed for white skin. The phone rang at 3:17. Tamika's voice was breathless. "Natasha Cole just mentioned us on her Instagram Live. She's showing our Radiant Earth Foundation and saying it's the first product that actually matches her undertones." Natasha Cole, R&B superstar with 30 million followers. How did she even find out about it? Jasmine asked, stunned. Her makeup artist saw our campaign, ordered the full line yesterday. By morning, Jasmine hadn't slept. She'd spent the night tracking the explosion across social media, coordinating with Tamika to ensure the website could handle the sudden traffic, and drafting press responses for the inquiries already flooding Glow Up's inbox. She finally left the office at 7 to pick up the girls from Eleanor's. The triplets, now 5 years old and starting kindergarten in the fall, greeted her with their usual enthusiasm, oblivious to the seismic shift occurring in their mother's professional life. "Mommy, I learned to tie my shoes," Zora announced, displaying her perfectly knotted laces. "I wrote a song about butterflies," Maya added, already humming the first notes. "Did your campaign work?" Audrey asked pragmatically, always the most attuned to Jasmine's work. Jasmine knelt to embrace them, their small bodies fitting perfectly against hers. "It's working better than we hoped," she said, meeting Eleanor's knowing gaze over their heads. "You look like you haven't slept," Eleanor observed, handing Jasmine a travel mug of coffee. "I haven't. Glow Up is exploding. Natasha Cole mentioned them on social media, and now every beauty influencer is scrambling to get their products." Eleanor smiled with quiet pride. "I knew this would happen eventually. Your understanding of authentic messaging was always going to break through." "We need to talk," Jasmine said, taking a fortifying sip of coffee. "But first, I need to get these 3 to school." The day unfolded in a blur of media inquiries, stock depletion alerts from Glow Up's website, and calls from other beauty brands suddenly interested in Wilson Digital's services. By afternoon, Tamika called with news that the Today Show wanted to feature Glow Up in a segment on Black-owned beauty businesses. "They're asking if we have PR representation," Tamika said, her voice tight with excitement. "I told them Wilson Digital handles everything." "I'm not a publicist," Jasmine protested. "You're everything to us right now," Tamika replied simply. "We've sold more in the last 24 hours than in the entire previous year." That evening, as Jasmine helped the triplets with their homework in the small apartment she'd recently rented, a modest two-bedroom where the girls shared a room decorated in their signature colors, her phone rang again. This time it was from Essence magazine. "We're doing a feature on disruptors in the beauty industry," the editor explained. "Glow Up Cosmetics gave us your name, but we're actually more interested in you, the woman behind their viral campaign. How does a single mother of triplets revolutionize digital marketing for Black-owned businesses?" 2 weeks later, Jasmine sat in the Johnson Media Partners conference room across from Eleanor, the Essence article open on the table between them. The headline read, "Digital Disruptor: How Jasmine Wilson Turned Authenticity into Marketing Gold." "I can't keep doing both," Jasmine said softly. "Wilson Digital needs my full attention now. We've signed 3 new clients this week alone." Eleanor reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I've been waiting for this day. You were always meant for bigger things than my little agency." "Everything I know, I learned from you," Jasmine protested. "No," Eleanor shook her head firmly. "You had this in you all along. I just gave you desk space and occasional childcare." She smiled, the lines around her eyes crinkling. "You were always destined for higher flights. I'm just grateful I got to see the beginning of your journey." The first day of kindergarten arrived with both emotional and professional significance. Jasmine stood at the entrance to PS 28, watching her 3 daughters in their carefully chosen outfits: Zora in purple plaid, Maya in green stripes, Audrey in yellow polka dots, clutching identical lunchboxes and backpacks containing the supplies Jasmine had labeled meticulously the night before. "You're going to have an amazing day," she told them, kneeling to straighten Maya's collar. "Remember what we always say?" "We are indispensable," Zora began confidently. "Unquestionable," Maya continued. "And irreplaceable," Audrey finished. "That's right," Jasmine said, blinking back tears. "And I'll be right here at 3 o'clock to hear all about your adventures." As they disappeared into the building, Jasmine felt the familiar mix of pride and panic that had accompanied every milestone. They were growing so fast, becoming such distinct individuals despite their identical faces. And while Wilson Digital was finally taking off, she still questioned daily whether she was giving them enough of herself. The offices of Wilson Digital, no longer just a table in a rented co-working space, but an actual suite with 3 employees besides herself, buzzed with energy when she arrived. The phone rang constantly with inquiries from businesses that had seen the glow-up success story. Emails required immediate attention. Proposals needed drafting. By October, Wilson Digital had signed 10 new clients and hired 2 more staff members. The company's revenue had tripled, allowing Jasmine to finally pay herself a salary that covered the girls' needs without constant financial anxiety. The investor meeting in November wasn't something she'd sought out. A venture capital firm specializing in minority-owned businesses had reached out after reading about Wilson Digital's unique approach to marketing for underserved communities. "We see tremendous potential for scaling your model," the lead investor said, studying Jasmine across the conference table. "Your understanding of these markets is unparalleled." Jasmine straightened her spine, channeling the confidence she'd always possessed but rarely been in a position to display. "I'm not interested in outside investment at this time. We're growing organically at a pace that allows us to maintain quality and authenticity." The investor looked surprised. "Most entrepreneurs in your position would jump at this opportunity." "I'm not most entrepreneurs," Jasmine replied evenly, "and I've learned the value of controlling my own destiny." That evening, as the girls completed homework in the agency's small conference room, a regular occurrence now that Wilson Digital demanded more of Jasmine's time, the television in the corner played CNBC's closing market report. "Blackwood Enterprises announced a major expansion today," the anchor reported. CEO Marcus Blackwood signed a deal bringing the luxury hotel chain into Asian markets, representing their largest international venture to date. Jasmine froze, marker poised over the strategy document she'd been annotating. On screen, Marcus looked exactly as she remembered, perhaps with a few more lines around his eyes, his smile still practiced and perfect as he spoke to reporters. "The future of business is built by people who know their value," he declared confidently. The girls, absorbed in their assignments, didn't notice their mother's sudden stillness or the flash of pain that crossed her face. They didn't see how she slowly set down the marker, turned off the television with deliberate movements, and took 3 deep breaths. They didn't know that the man on screen was their biological father, the man who had deemed their existence a complication, and their mother insufficient. "Mommy, can you help me with this math problem?" Maya asked, breaking the moment. Jasmine turned away from the dark screen, away from Marcus and his world of inherited privilege. "Of course, sweetheart. Let's figure it out together." Later that night, after tucking the girls into bed in their shared room with its 3 carefully individualized spaces, Jasmine sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open, the glow illuminating her determined expression. She pulled up the business plan for Wilson Digital and began refining the 5-year growth strategy. "One day," she whispered to herself, "we'll be exactly where you are, Marcus. And when that day comes, you'll understand exactly what you threw away." The next morning brought an email from Better Business Monthly requesting an interview and photo shoot. "We're featuring emerging agencies disrupting traditional marketing models," the editor wrote. "Your work with minority-owned businesses has caught our attention." A week later, Jasmine stood with her 7 employees and 3 daughters for Wilson Digital's first official company photograph. The diverse team of primarily women surrounded Jasmine with the triplets front and center, their identical faces beaming with pride. The caption would read, "Jasmine Wilson and the team revolutionizing representation in digital marketing." While turning off the television that showed Marcus Blackwood's satisfied face, Jasmine didn't know that in just 6 years, she would be the one in the news, when her revolutionary technological innovation would make Blackwood Enterprises practically obsolete in its own market. The Wilson Digital offices pulsed with energy, a stark contrast to the modest home office where Jasmine had sketched her first business plan 5 years earlier. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Brooklyn, and the once tiny operation now occupied an entire floor, with 47 employees bustling between sleek workstations and glass-walled conference rooms. At 35, Jasmine had transformed from a struggling single mother into a respected CEO, her company generating $2 million in annual revenue. Jasmine paused in the doorway of the children's area, a colorful space she'd insisted on creating when the company expanded last year. The triplets, now 10 years old, had just arrived from school and were settling into their afternoon routines. Despite identical faces, they had evolved into distinctly different personalities, each gravitating toward her own passion with remarkable focus. Zora sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by computer parts, her nimble fingers reassembling what appeared to be an ancient desktop tower. A junior developer watched in fascination as she narrated her process. "The motherboard connects everything," Zora explained with the confidence of a seasoned engineer. "It's like the brain and nervous system combined." "Where did you learn this?" the developer asked, clearly impressed. Zora shrugged. "YouTube tutorials. Plus, I read the manual." Across the room, Maya sat at the upright piano Jasmine had installed after realizing her daughter's musical talent transcended childish interest. Her eyes were closed as her fingers danced across the keys, creating melodies that seemed impossible for a 10-year-old to compose. 2 content writers had paused their work to listen, one of them subtly recording on her phone. Maya's compositions had become unofficial soundtracks for creative brainstorming sessions at Wilson Digital, her music often playing softly in the background during campaigns that required fresh thinking. Near the windows, Audrey stood addressing 4 summer interns, her posture perfect, her gestures precise as she moderated what appeared to be an impromptu debate on social media ethics. Despite being half their age, she commanded the room with natural authority. While engagement metrics matter, Audrey was saying, we must consider the psychological impact of algorithmic content delivery on developing minds. Jasmine felt her chest tighten with pride. These remarkable children had defied every expectation, thriving despite circumstances that should have limited them. Or perhaps because of those circumstances, they had inherited her determination along with Marcus's aristocratic features, a combination that made them formidable even before adolescence. The moment was interrupted by Linda, her executive assistant. "Eleanor's here to see you. She says it's important." Eleanor Johnson, now 62, still moved with the confident grace that had intimidated Madison Avenue for decades, though her once salt and pepper hair was now completely silver. The lines around her eyes had deepened, but her gaze remained sharp as ever. Something in her expression today, however, gave Jasmine pause. "You look tired," Jasmine said as they embraced. "Is everything all right?" Eleanor smiled thinly. "Let's talk privately." In Jasmine's office, with its sweeping views and awards lining the walls, Eleanor declined coffee and sat heavily in the visitor's chair. "I've been to see my doctor," she began without preamble. "The news isn't good. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer." The world seemed to tilt beneath Jasmine's feet. "That's not possible," she whispered, though she knew it was not only possible but happening. Eleanor had been looking increasingly tired for months, losing weight, occasionally wincing when she thought no one was watching. 6 months, perhaps a year with aggressive treatment, Eleanor continued matter-of-factly. "Which brings me to the reason for my visit. We need to discuss the future of Johnson Media." Jasmine shook her head. "No, we need to discuss treatment options, specialists." "Already handled," Eleanor interrupted gently. "This isn't my first rodeo with cancer, though it will be my last. I've made my peace with that. What I haven't made peace with is the thought of my agency, my life's work, fading away after I'm gone." She placed a folder on Jasmine's desk. "A merger proposal. Johnson Media Partners and Wilson Digital become Johnson Wilson Media. My clients, your innovation, my legacy, your future." Jasmine opened the folder with trembling hands. The merger terms were generous to the point of absurdity. Eleanor was essentially gifting her the agency she'd built over 30 years. "I can't accept this," Jasmine said, closing the folder. "You're not accepting anything," Eleanor replied firmly. "You're ensuring that what I've built continues to thrive. There's a difference." Their discussion was interrupted by the triplets bursting into the office, immediately sensing the atmosphere and moderating their energy. They'd known Eleanor their entire lives, calling her Grandma L since they could speak. "What's wrong?" Audrey asked, her perceptiveness cutting through pretense as always. Eleanor patted the sofa beside her. "Come sit with me, my brilliant girls. I have something to tell you." The following months blurred together for Jasmine. Days were split between running 2 agencies in the process of merging, overseeing the triplets' increasingly demanding schedules, and spending precious hours with Eleanor, whose decline was more rapid than even the doctors had predicted. Nights, however, belonged to her secret project. After the girls were asleep, Jasmine retreated to her home office, surrounding herself with multiple screens displaying complex code and algorithms. The Phoenix platform, as she'd named it in her mind, had begun as a simple idea during a 3 a.m. feeding session when the girls were infants. What if marketing could anticipate human needs rather than merely respond to them? 7 years later, that seed had grown into an advanced algorithmic system that analyzed behavioral patterns across platforms to predict consumer needs before they were consciously realized. It went beyond traditional targeted marketing, creating personalized connections between brands and consumers that felt intuitive rather than intrusive. On nights when the code refused to cooperate, Jasmine would glance at the framed photo on her desk. Eleanor and herself at the first Wilson Digital office opening, the triplets as kindergartners between them, all 5 of them beaming with possibility. The image always renewed her determination. She was building this not just for herself, but for all of them. Winter gave way to spring, and Eleanor's condition deteriorated rapidly. The merger was finalized in April, the official announcement generating significant industry buzz. Johnson Wilson Media was immediately recognized as a formidable new player, combining Eleanor's established luxury clientele with Jasmine's innovative approaches to digital engagement. In May, Eleanor stopped coming to the office altogether. Her Brooklyn brownstone, once the sanctuary that had sheltered Jasmine and the newborn triplets, became a hushed space of whispered medical consultations and hospice care. Jasmine brought the girls to visit every afternoon after school, maintaining the ritual even as Eleanor became less responsive. They would sit beside her bed, Zora explaining her latest technology project, Maya playing gentle melodies on a keyboard they'd installed in the bedroom, Audrey reading aloud from Eleanor's favorite poems. On a rain-soaked Tuesday in June, the call came at dawn. Eleanor had slipped away peacefully in her sleep. Despite months of preparation, the finality struck Jasmine with physical force. She sat motionless at her kitchen counter, memories washing over her. Eleanor finding her collapsed in the library, offering an internship when no one else would consider a pregnant woman, converting her home office into a nursery for 3 unexpected babies, teaching Jasmine the intricacies of agency management while bouncing a fussy infant on her hip. The triplets processed their grief differently. Zora retreated into technical projects, building an elaborate digital memorial that cataloged Eleanor's achievements. Maya composed a haunting melody that she played at the funeral, bringing the assembled mourners to tears. Audrey wrote and delivered a eulogy that balanced emotional honesty with celebratory remembrance, her poise remarkable for a 10-year-old. The reading of the will took place in Eleanor's attorney's office, a wood-paneled room that smelled of leather and tradition. Jasmine had expected Eleanor's assets to pass to distant relatives she occasionally mentioned. Instead, the attorney read, "To Jasmine Wilson, who showed me that family is created through love rather than blood, I leave my entire ownership interest in Johnson Wilson Media, my Brooklyn residence, and all associated properties. You were the daughter I never had, and I could not be prouder of the woman you've become." That night, after tucking the girls into bed, Jasmine returned to her home office. Her grief, still raw and pulsing, transformed into determined energy as she faced her screens. The Phoenix platform was close to completion, an algorithmic revolution that would transform how brands connected with consumers. Through tears that occasionally blurred her vision, Jasmine coded until dawn, channeling her loss into creation. As the first light broke over the Manhattan skyline visible from her window, she executed the final compile. The system processed for 3 minutes, an eternity in computing terms, before displaying a single green message: Phoenix platform initialization successful. Jasmine leaned back in her chair, exhaustion and triumph washing over her in equal measure. She had done it. The platform worked, and it would change everything. The demonstration for her executive team the following week left them stunned into silence. The Phoenix platform didn't just analyze consumer data, it predicted behavioral patterns with uncanny accuracy, creating marketing opportunities that felt like serendipity rather than targeting. "This isn't just a tool," Jasmine explained as the screens displayed real-time results from their beta testing. "It's a revolution in digital marketing. We're not just reaching consumers, we're anticipating their needs before they consciously recognize them." Word spread quickly through industry channels. Within days, a representative from Silicon Valley's largest venture capital firm appeared unannounced in their reception area. "I need to speak with Jasmine Wilson Johnson immediately," he insisted, using the hyphenated surname Jasmine had adopted after the merger in honor of Eleanor. "We've heard about something extraordinary happening here." The offer he presented was staggering: $60 million for exclusive rights to the Phoenix platform. Jasmine listened politely, asked insightful questions, and then declined without hesitation. "I'm not building this to sell," she explained, walking him to the elevator. "I'm building a legacy." As the doors closed on his shocked expression, Jasmine returned to her office where the triplets waited, having arrived from school during the meeting. They looked at her expectantly, somehow understanding the significance of what had just transpired. "Did you really turn down $60 million? Zora asked, eyes wide behind her glasses. Jasmine smiled, gathering them into a group hug. "Some things are worth more than money. Eleanor taught me that." "Like changing the world?" Audrey suggested. "Exactly like that," Jasmine confirmed. While declining the multi-million-dollar offer for the Phoenix algorithm, determined to maintain control of her creation, Jasmine didn't imagine that in just 3 years she would be declining billion-dollar offers, including a desperate proposal from Marcus Blackwood's company, which was beginning to feel the first tremors of its downfall. The Phoenix Media Group's skyline presence was visible from 20 blocks away, a gleaming 40-story tower with the stylized Phoenix logo illuminated against the Manhattan night. Inside the executive suite on the 38th floor, Jasmine signed the final documents authorizing the acquisition of Neuraltech, a promising AI startup that represented her 5th technology acquisition in 18 months. "Congratulations, Ms. Wilson-Johnson," said the silver-haired attorney, sliding the documents into a leather portfolio. "Neuraltech's integration systems should complement the Phoenix platform beautifully." Jasmine nodded, her signature Hermes scarf a vibrant splash of color against her tailored black suit. At 38, she had grown into her power with a grace that intimidated competitors and inspired her expanding workforce of over 300 employees. "The integration team starts tomorrow," she replied, rising from her chair. "I want their neural network incorporated into our core platform by quarter's end." 3 years had passed since Eleanor's death and the Phoenix platform's launch. What had begun as an algorithm had evolved into a technological ecosystem that had transformed digital marketing fundamentally. The Johnson Wilson Media Agency had expanded exponentially, rebranding as the Phoenix Media Group to reflect its broader focus on technology and media consolidation. As her executive team filed out, Jasmine's phone chimed with a familiar alert, a reminder that the Triplets boarding school was hosting parent conferences tomorrow. Despite her punishing schedule, she had never missed a school event, flying to New Hampshire monthly to maintain her presence in her daughters' lives. At 13, Zora, Maya, and Audrey attended the prestigious Phillips Exeter Academy on full academic scholarships, a point of particular pride for Jasmine, who had insisted they earn their places through merit rather than her now considerable financial influence. The school had initially been reluctant to accept triplets, concerned about telling them apart and potential academic disparities. Those concerns had evaporated within their first semester. Jasmine's private helicopter awaited on the rooftop landing pad, ready to transport her to Teterboro Airport, where the Phoenix Media Group's Gulfstream would fly her to New Hampshire. The convenience of private aviation had been a business necessity as much as a luxury. Time had become her scarcest resource as the company expanded. Phillips Exeter's campus sprawled across lush grounds, its brick buildings exuding centuries of academic tradition. Jasmine walked the familiar path to Dunbar Hall, where conferences were held, passing students who recognized her with respectful nods. Her daughter's achievements had made the Wilson-Johnson name well known on campus, though few understood the full extent of their mother's growing empire. "Ms. Wilson-Johnson, welcome," greeted Dr. Henderson, the Academy's technology director. "I was hoping to catch you before your meetings with the girls' advisors. Zora's latest project has generated significant interest." He led Jasmine to the computer science lab where her eldest daughter, by 7 minutes, had commandeered 3 workstations. Zora, lanky and focused in her purple-accented school uniform, barely looked up when they entered. "Mom, perfect timing," she said, fingers flying across the keyboard. "I just finished the beta version." On the screen appeared a sleek, intuitive interface, an educational app designed to teach coding fundamentals to elementary students. Zora developed this for her community service project, Dr. Henderson explained, barely containing his enthusiasm. But it's far beyond what we expected. We've been testing it with local public schools and the results are remarkable. Children who struggled with basic math concepts are intuitively understanding programming logic. Jasmine watched as Zora demonstrated the app's adaptive learning capabilities, automatically adjusting to each user's pace and learning style. The school board has already requested implementation across the district, Dr. Henderson continued. At 13, your daughter has created something that could change educational accessibility nationwide. Zora finally looked up, a flicker of vulnerability crossing her confident expression. Is it good enough, Mom? Jasmine recognized the question beneath the question, the need for validation that all three girls occasionally revealed despite their extraordinary self-assurance. She placed a hand on Zora's shoulder, feeling the delicate bones beneath her fingertips. It's brilliant, she said softly. More importantly, it's generous. You're using your gifts to lift others up. From the technology building, Jasmine crossed the quadrangle to the Arts Center, where Maya's music theory teacher awaited. The elegant concert hall was empty, except for a solitary figure at the grand piano. Maya, lost in composition, her green headband keeping her braids from falling into her eyes as she played. She's been working on this piece for months, whispered Ms. Abernathy, the distinguished composer who had taken a special interest in Maya's development. The Philharmonic in Hartford has commissioned it for their Young Composers Showcase. The melody that filled the space was complex and evocative, layered with emotions that seemed impossible from someone so young. Jasmine stood motionless, listening to her middle daughter translate feelings into music with preternatural skill. When Maya finished, she turned and spotted her mother. Her smile, identical to her sister's yet somehow uniquely hers, brightened the room. They're performing it next month, she said, excitement overriding her usual composure. At the Hartford Symphony Hall. Will you come? Wild horses couldn't keep me away, Jasmine promised. Her final conference took her to Wheelwright Hall, where the debate team was practicing. Audrey stood at the podium, commanding the room with measured words and strategic pauses that reminded Jasmine forcefully of Eleanor. Therefore, we must conclude that algorithmic bias in college admissions software perpetuates rather than alleviates historical inequities, Audrey concluded, making eye contact with each judge. Thank you. The faculty advisor, Ms. Patterson, joined Jasmine at the back of the room. Your daughter's speech on educational equality went viral last month, she said. 3 million views and counting. The National Youth Leadership Forum has invited her to deliver the keynote at their annual conference. Jasmine watched as Audrey fielded questions with poised confidence, neither defensive nor aggressive, simply assured in her reasoning. She reminds me of someone, Ms. Patterson added thoughtfully. Her grandmother, Jasmine replied softly. A woman who changed the trajectory of our lives. That evening, Jasmine took the girls to dinner in town, a rare luxury of uninterrupted time together. In the private dining room of Exeter's only fine restaurant, they transitioned seamlessly from school achievements to deeper conversations. We've been researching our biological father, Audrey said suddenly, setting down her fork with characteristic directness. Jasmine stilled, her expression carefully neutral. This moment had been inevitable, though she had hoped it might come later. What prompted this? She asked. The triplets exchanged glances, that silent communication they'd perfected since infancy. Genetics project, Zora explained. We were mapping hereditary traits, and obviously half of our DNA is unaccounted for. We found articles about Blackwood Enterprises, Maya continued, her voice gentler than her sister's. The company seems to be having problems. Jasmine nodded slowly. She'd been aware of Marcus's business difficulties through industry channels. The Blackwood Enterprises hotel division had suffered a major setback when a financial scandal implicated several board members. Additionally, Marcus's carefully orchestrated marriage to Senator Mitchell's daughter had ended in a tabloid-worthy divorce that cost him politically and financially. "We know who he is," Audrey concluded. "What we don't know is our own history, the complete version." Jasmine had never lied to her daughters about their origins, but she had cushioned the truth as they grew, focusing on how they had overcome rather than the initial rejection. "You deserve the full story," she agreed, "but not in a restaurant. Tomorrow, when we're home, I'll show you something I've kept for you." Back in their Manhattan penthouse the following evening, Jasmine unlocked a cabinet in her home office and removed 3 identical leather-bound journals. She had begun keeping them during her pregnancy, documenting everything for daughters she feared might grow up without her should the complications worsen. "I've maintained these since before you were born," she explained, passing one to each girl. "Every significant moment, every challenge we faced, every triumph we celebrated, and yes, the complete, unvarnished truth about Marcus Blackwood and how he responded to news of your existence." The triplets settled into the living room, opening the journals with identical expressions of reverent curiosity. For hours they read in silence, occasionally glancing up with questions that Jasmine answered honestly. "He offered you money to resolve the problem?" Zora finally asked, her technological mind processing the clinical cruelty of the transaction. "He said we were a complication to his career," Maya added, her artistic sensitivity making the rejection cut deeper. "He called you insufficient?" Audrey's question came last, the most damning in its simplicity. Jasmine met their identical gazes, 3 pairs of eyes that reflected Marcus's shape but held her determination. "Yes to all 3 questions," she confirmed. "But that's not the important part of our story." "What is?" they asked in unintentional unison. "What came after?" Jasmine replied. "How his rejection became our freedom to define ourselves on our own terms." The next morning, Jasmine received an unexpected call from her assistant. "The Metropolitan Business Forum Organizing Committee is on line 1. They want you as their keynote speaker for next month's conference in Chicago." The forum was the premier gathering of business leaders nationwide, a significant platform that would position Phoenix Media Group alongside established conglomerates. As Jasmine reviewed the formal invitation that arrived by courier an hour later, a name on the speakers list caught her attention. Marcus Blackwood, CEO, Blackwood Enterprises. For a moment she considered declining. 13 years had passed since Marcus had deemed her insufficient. She had built her empire without him, raised their daughters without him, and constructed a life that exceeded anything she might have had as his complication. The triplets found her on the terrace, still contemplating the invitation. "We've been talking," Zora began, their spokesperson by unspoken agreement. "If we ever meet him, it should be our choice," Maya continued. "And on our terms, not his," Audrey finished. Jasmine studied their faces. 13 years of love and sacrifice, determination and triumph reflected in 3 identical expressions of resolute clarity. "I agree," she said finally. "Your biological connection to Marcus Blackwood is a fact, but your relationship with him, if any, should be your decision when you're ready." She didn't mention the invitation. That was a different decision, one about business, power, and perhaps a reckoning long delayed. That night, as her daughters slept, Jasmine drafted her acceptance of the forum's invitation, specifying her requirements, accommodations for her daughters, schedule adjustments to avoid direct interaction with certain speakers, and the prime opening keynote slot rather than the closing address they had offered. The committee responded within hours, agreeing to all conditions. While accepting the invitation to be the keynote speaker at the prestigious Metropolitan Business Forum, Jasmine didn't know that this would be the stage for the confrontation she had imagined for 15 long years, when she would finally face Marcus Blackwood not as the young woman he had discarded, but as the woman who had surpassed him in every aspect. The sleek Sikorsky S-76 helicopter descended toward Chicago's skyline, its blades slicing through the morning air. Jasmine gazed through the window, the familiar flutter of pre-speech adrenaline mingling with something deeper, the knowledge that Marcus Blackwood would be somewhere in that city, unaware that his past was about to collide with his present. "We'll be landing in 5 minutes, Ms. Wilson-Johnson," the pilot announced through her headset. Jasmine smoothed her white Valentino pantsuit, a power statement she'd selected deliberately for this morning. The diamond earrings, a gift she'd purchased for herself when Phoenix Media Group reached its first billion in valuation, caught the light as she checked her reflection in her compact mirror. "Is everything prepared at the hotel?" she asked her chief of staff, Amara, who sat across from her reviewing last-minute details on her tablet. "Your suite is ready. The girls arrived with Dr. Bennett an hour ago and are settled in. Your speech has been loaded into the teleprompter, though I doubt you'll need it." Jasmine nodded, closing her eyes briefly to center herself. The Metropolitan Business Forum represented more than just another keynote address. It was an announcement to the old guard of American business that she had arrived, not as an invited guest, but as a defining voice. The event organizers mentioned that attendance is 30% higher than last year. Amara continued, "Your participation seems to have generated significant interest." What Amara didn't say, what didn't need saying, was that the business world was fascinated by the meteoric rise of Phoenix Media Group and its enigmatic founder, a black woman who had built a multi-billion-dollar empire seemingly out of nowhere in an industry dominated by tech bros and old money. If only they knew the full story. The helicopter touched down on the rooftop landing pad of the Four Seasons Chicago. A hotel representative waited to escort Jasmine directly to the service elevator, bypassing the public areas where early-arriving forum attendees might recognize her. The element of surprise was crucial to her plan. In the presidential suite, her daughters waited. At 13, the triplets had grown into their beauty with a quiet confidence that sometimes startled Jasmine. They were seated in the living area, already changed into the coordinated blue dresses they would wear for the event, 3 different shades that complemented their warm brown skin perfectly. "Did you read through the speech?" Jasmine asked, embracing each girl in turn. "Twice," Audrey confirmed. "The section on global partnerships is particularly compelling." "The statistics on demographic engagement patterns need updating," Zora added, holding up her tablet. "I've compiled the latest data from our Singapore expansion." Maya, always the most emotionally attuned, studied her mother's face. "Are you nervous about seeing him?" The directness of the question caught Jasmine off guard. She had not explicitly told the girls that Marcus would be at the forum, though they were certainly capable of checking the speakers list themselves. "I'm not nervous," Jasmine replied honestly. "I'm ready." Across the city at the Palmer House Hilton, Marcus Blackwood adjusted his Brioni tie for the 3rd time, dissatisfied with the reflection staring back at him from the hotel mirror. At 47, he still possessed the patrician good looks that had opened doors throughout his life, though the gray at his temples had advanced considerably in the past year. Stress had etched new lines around his eyes that now held a wariness that hadn't been there in his younger, more arrogant days. The Blackwood Enterprises quarterly report lay open on the desk behind him, its figures a damning indictment of his leadership. The company his grandfather had founded and his father had expanded was contracting under his stewardship, losing market share to more agile competitors and suffering from the reputational damage of the investment scandal that had implicated 2 board members. His phone chimed with a message from his assistant. "Schedule change. Opening keynote now, Phoenix Media Group CEO. Your panel moved to 2 p.m. Marcus frowned. He had counted on the opening slot to make his case to potential investors. Being relegated to an afternoon panel significantly diminished his visibility. Who was this Phoenix CEO who had bumped him? The name was vaguely familiar, one of the newer tech conglomerates that had been aggressively expanding. He made a mental note to attend the keynote. "Know thy competition" was a Blackwood family motto. The grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hilton buzzed with anticipation. 800 executives, investors, and business journalists had gathered for the annual forum, networking over coffee before the program began. Marcus took his seat in the front row, reviewing his panel notes one last time. The crowd's energy shifted suddenly, conversations quieting as the organizers approached the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, we're pleased to announce a slight change to our program. Our opening keynote will be delivered by the founder and CEO of Phoenix Media Group, arriving directly from their groundbreaking expansion tour in Asia. Marcus glanced up from his notes, mildly curious. The large screens flanking the stage illuminated with the Phoenix Media Group logo, followed by a professional headshot of a woman. A striking black woman with confident eyes and an elegant smile. His blood froze. The name appeared beneath the image: Jasmine Wilson Johnson, founder and CEO. It couldn't be. Not the same Jasmine. Not the frightened young analyst he'd dismissed from his life 15 years ago. But as the ballroom doors opened and the audience rose in applause, Marcus knew with devastating certainty that his past had just walked back into his present. Jasmine strode to the stage with measured confidence, her white suit luminous against her brown skin, her smile genuine as she acknowledged the enthusiastic reception. She took the podium with the ease of someone accustomed to commanding attention, waiting for the applause to settle before speaking. Innovation isn't just about technology, she began, her voice rich and controlled. It's about recognizing value where others cannot see it. It's about transforming rejection into resolution, obstacles into opportunities. Each word landed like a precise blow. Marcus sank lower in his chair, his prepared notes forgotten as he stared at the woman he had once deemed insufficient, now commanding a room filled with the most powerful business leaders in America. For 45 minutes, Jasmine outlined Phoenix Media Group's vision for democratizing digital media globally. She revealed partnerships with African tech incubators, strategic acquisitions in emerging Asian markets, and proprietary algorithms that had revolutionized how brands connected with consumers. With each impressive slide, each staggering growth figure, the audience's engagement deepened. Our latest venture brings together content creators from 37 countries, leveraging our Phoenix platform to ensure their work reaches precisely the audiences who hunger for authentic voices, she explained, gesturing to a world map highlighting Phoenix's global reach. Marcus watched in mute shock. The Blackwood Enterprises' international strategy, the one he had been struggling to finance for the past year, seemed pathetically small in comparison. But perhaps our most meaningful initiative, Jasmine continued, her voice softening slightly, is our scholarship program for young developers from underrepresented communities. After all, innovation thrives when we nurture talent wherever we find it. She turned toward the side of the stage, her expression warming. And speaking of extraordinary talent, I'd like to introduce my greatest inspirations and toughest critics, Zora, Maya, and Audrey Wilson Johnson. The audience murmured with interest as three teenage girls walked onto the stage with practiced grace. Dressed in complementary shades of blue, they moved with identical fluid motions to stand beside their mother. The room's murmurs intensified as people registered what they were seeing. Triplets. Three elegant young women with the same delicate features, the same confident posture, the same intelligent eyes. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. One girl would have been damning enough. Three was an impossibility he couldn't process. But as he stared at their profiles, he saw himself reflected undeniably in the shape of their eyes, the line of their jaws, the precise way they held their hands when speaking, gestures he'd seen in family portraits of Blackwoods going back generations. 15 years of denial collapsed in an instant. Not one daughter, but three. Three remarkable young women who shared his DNA but nothing of his presence or influence. Zora has developed an educational app currently used in over 200 public schools, Jasmine was saying, her arm around the first girl. Maya's musical compositions were featured at Carnegie Hall last spring, and Audrey's speech on educational equity has been viewed over 7 million times online. The audience applauded enthusiastically as each girl briefly addressed the crowd, their poise and articulation remarkable for their age. Marcus couldn't hear their words over the roaring in his ears. These were his children, his daughters, speaking confidently to a room full of business leaders while he sat anonymously in the audience, a stranger to his own blood. When the presentation concluded, Jasmine and the triplets received a standing ovation. Marcus rose mechanically with the crowd, his applause hollow as he watched them exit the stage together, a complete family unit that had flourished without him. The networking reception that followed was torture. Marcus moved through the crowd with desperate determination, watching as attendees flocked around Jasmine and the girls. He observed from a distance as she conversed easily with the governor of Illinois, two Silicon Valley tech executives hovering nearby, clearly eager for her attention. It took nearly 45 minutes to maneuver himself into her vicinity. When he finally reached the edge of her conversation circle, his mouth was dry, his prepared words evaporating. "Jasmine," he managed, his voice betraying his nervousness. She turned slowly, her eyes meeting his without a flicker of surprise. Marcus Blackwood. How unexpected. Her tone suggested it was anything but unexpected. She had known he would be here. Perhaps she had orchestrated this entire moment. "Could we speak privately?" he asked, acutely aware of the curious glances from those nearby. With a polite smile to her companions, Jasmine guided Marcus to a quieter corner of the reception hall. 15 years is a long time to suddenly desire a private conversation, don't you think? They're my daughters," he stammered, glancing toward the triplets who were now surrounded by young executives clearly impressed by their poise and intelligence. "Biologically speaking, yes," Jasmine replied coolly. "In all other relevant aspects, no." "Why didn't you ever tell me they were triplets? I had a right to know." Jasmine's laugh was chilling. "Right? You relinquished any right when you told me I was insufficient and offered me money to resolve the problem. Your exact words, if memory serves. I was young, scared. I made a terrible mistake." "A mistake that clearly hasn't haunted you for the past 15 years, she observed. "Curious how your remorse coincides with my daughter's reaching adolescence and my company surpassing yours in value." Their conversation was interrupted as Maya approached, her expression curious but controlled. "Mother, the Japanese ambassador would like to discuss the Tokyo expansion." Jasmine smiled with genuine affection. "Of course, darling. I'll be there in a moment." Marcus couldn't contain himself. "You're Maya, right? I heard about your Carnegie Hall performance. Extraordinary for someone so young." Maya studied him with penetrating eyes identical to his own. "Yes, I'm Maya. And you are?" "This is Marcus Blackwood," Jasmine intervened smoothly. "An old acquaintance." "Oh," Maya replied, her face lighting with recognition. "From Blackwood Enterprises. I read about your company's troubles in the Financial Times. Fascinating how such an established institution can crumble so quickly due to ethical leadership failures." The blow was precise and clearly intentional. Before Marcus could respond, Maya was already gliding away with elegant poise. "I taught them to research thoroughly," Jasmine explained. "They know exactly who you are, Marcus. They know every detail of what happened. Not out of bitterness, but transparency. I never lied to them about their origins. I want to know them. I want to be part of their lives." Jasmine shook her head. "That's not up for negotiation. They have a perfectly complete life, first-rate education, unlimited opportunities, unconditional love. What exactly do you think you can offer them now?" "I'm their father." His voice rose slightly, drawing glances. "Biologically, yes. We've established that. But fatherhood? That requires presence, Marcus. It requires sacrifice, sleepless nights, unwavering support. You have no track record in that department." The announcement that dinner would be served provided Jasmine the perfect opportunity to end the conversation. "If you'll excuse me, I'm the keynote speaker. Perhaps we can continue this conversation." "Never." While observing Marcus Blackwood walk away, visibly shaken by their encounter, Jasmine knew this was only the first act of a reckoning that had been 15 years in the making, and that the true confrontation, when it came, would be on her terms, not his. Media coverage of the Metropolitan Business Forum dominated business news cycles the following day. Financial analysts dissected Phoenix Media Group's international partnerships, tech bloggers speculated about forthcoming innovations, and social media buzzed with video clips of Jasmine's keynote. But across platforms, one image generated particular interest: a candid photograph capturing an intense exchange between Jasmine Wilson Johnson and Marcus Blackwood, their body language suggesting a history more complex than casual business acquaintances. "What exactly is the connection between these two power players?" asked a CNBC commentator as the screen displayed the image. Sources say Blackwood appeared visibly shaken after their conversation. In her Park Avenue office 3 days after returning from Chicago, Jasmine reviewed the media coverage with her PR team. The speculation didn't concern her. She had built her life in the public eye with careful boundaries between personal and professional. What concerned her was the triplets' reaction to finally seeing Marcus in person, however briefly. Her executive assistant's voice interrupted the meeting through the intercom. "Ms. Wilson Johnson, I apologize for the interruption, but Marcus Blackwood is in reception. He's been waiting for 2 hours and refuses to leave without seeing you." The PR team exchanged glances as Jasmine's expression cooled. "Tell him I'm in meetings all day." "I did, 3 times. He says he'll wait as long as necessary." Jasmine considered her options. Security could remove him, creating a scene that would feed the already circulating rumors. Or she could face him, control the narrative, and end this distraction. "Give me 10 minutes to finish here, then send him up. And Rebecca, time it. He gets exactly 10 minutes." When Marcus entered Jasmine's office precisely 10 minutes later, the contrast between them was striking. His bespoke suit, once a symbol of his unassailable privilege, hung slightly loose on his frame. The confident swagger that had defined him 15 years ago had given way to a hesitant posture. Meanwhile, Jasmine rose from behind her desk, a custom piece of African blackwood and glass, looking every inch the media mogul in a structured crimson dress that complemented her flawless skin. Behind her, floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the Manhattan skyline, the very empire he had once suggested she could never belong to. "You have 10 minutes, she said, gesturing to a visitor's chair. "I suggest you use them efficiently." Marcus sat, his eyes taking in the office. The wall of industry awards, the framed magazine covers featuring Jasmine, the subtle touches of luxury that spoke of hard-earned success rather than inherited privilege. "I'm asking for a chance," he began without preamble. "Not for me, but for them. They deserve to know their father." "Interesting how you phrase that," Jasmine replied, remaining standing. "As if it's a right of theirs that I'm denying, rather than a direct consequence of your choice." "I made a terrible mistake, Jasmine. I'm willing to do whatever necessary to make amends." "Amends?" She raised an eyebrow. "How exactly do you plan to make amends for 15 years of absence? The nights I held 3 babies with fevers simultaneously? The first steps you didn't see? The piano recitals? Science fairs, debate competitions?" Marcus placed a folder on her desk. "I've prepared a proposal. I want to establish a trust fund for each of them, $5 million each, and I want to legally recognize them, give them my surname." Jasmine laughed genuinely for the first time. "You really don't understand, do you? My daughters are inheriting an empire far greater than anything you can offer. As for your surname, well, Blackwood Enterprises is heading toward bankruptcy proceedings, while the Wilson Johnson name represents innovation and integrity." The office door opened, and the triplets entered, clearly expected by Jasmine but surprising Marcus. All 3 wore school uniforms. Their boarding school had granted special leave for this New York visit. The subtle differences in their accessories, Zora's purple watch, Maya's green scarf, Audrey's yellow headband, provided the only immediate visual distinction between them. "Girls, you remember Mr. Blackwood from the event in Chicago?" Zora, the most analytical of the three, studied Marcus with clinical interest. "Your genetic profile is fascinating. It explains some of our characteristics that didn't come from our mother." "We were curious," added Audrey, the most direct. "It's not every day you meet the man who decided we weren't worth it." "That wasn't," Marcus protested. "Actually, it was exactly that," interrupted Maya softly. "We have the records. Mother kept detailed journals from that period. Very revealing." Marcus looked at Jasmine, betrayed. "You planned this." "No, Marcus. I merely respected their wish to meet you when they expressed curiosity after Chicago. They're nearly adults, perfectly capable of forming their own opinions." For the next hour, the triplets conducted what could only be described as a professional interview with their biological father. They questioned his choices, his priorities, his values. Without hostility, but with relentless precision, they deconstructed each attempt at justification. "You said our existence would be a disaster for your career," Zora noted, consulting her tablet. "Yet studies show children actually humanize public figures. Your advisors failed you on basic public relations strategy." "You called our mother insufficient," Maya continued, her gentle tone making the recitation more damning. "Yet her market valuation now exceeds Blackwood Enterprises by a factor of 7. Your judgment was objectively flawed. You offered $15,000 to resolve the problem," Audrey added, "an insultingly low figure even by 2008 standards. If you were going to attempt to erase us, you might have at least accurately valued the potential you were discarding." Marcus sat stunned by their coordinated dissection of his past actions. These weren't emotional teenagers seeking a father figure. They were poised young women analyzing a business case study in poor decision-making. "What exactly did you hope to accomplish today?" Audrey asked finally. "What outcome were you seeking?" The directness of the question stripped away Marcus's prepared responses. Looking at these three extraordinary young women, unmistakably his daughters yet completely formed without his influence, he answered with unexpected honesty. "I don't know, probably nothing you need, but I'd like to try to be part of your lives." The triplets exchanged glances, a silent communication that excluded both Jasmine and Marcus. "We appreciate your honesty," responded Zora. "We may consider occasional interactions, perhaps quarterly lunches initially, without expectations of a paternal relationship," added Maya, "and with the clear understanding that our loyalty lies with our mother," concluded Audrey. When the meeting ended, Marcus found himself escorted to the elevator by Jasmine, the triplets having returned to the conference room to complete schoolwork. In the privacy of the corridor, he searched for words that might bridge the chasm of 15 years. "They're extraordinary," he finally said. "You've done an incredible job raising them." "They were born extraordinary," Jasmine replied. "I simply ensured they knew it. I'd like to make this work, whatever this is going to be. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but—" "You're right," she interrupted coolly. "You don't. My daughters have extended an olive branch because they're curious and compassionate. That speaks to their character, not your worthiness. If you disappoint them, there won't be a second chance." The elevator arrived, its soft chime punctuating her warning. As Marcus stepped inside, he asked the question that had haunted him since Chicago. "Did you know I would be at the forum? Did you plan all of this?" Jasmine's smile was enigmatic. "Marcus, I built a multi-billion-dollar empire from nothing while raising 3 children alone. Do you really think anything in my life happens by accident?" The elevator doors closed on his stunned expression. That night, Marcus sat alone in his Upper East Side apartment, the space that had once seemed so impressively luxurious now feeling hollow and sterile. On his television screen, Jasmine appeared in a CNBC interview discussing Phoenix Media Group's latest acquisition. The interviewer leaned forward with practiced intensity. As a single mother running a global empire, how do you balance parenthood and leadership? Jasmine's response was measured yet powerful. When you're deemed insufficient by someone, you have two choices: believe that assessment or transform it into fuel. I chose the latter. And now, my daughters grow up knowing they're more than sufficient. They're extraordinary, not because someone tells them so, but because they prove it every day through their own achievements. Marcus muted the television, her words echoing painfully in his mind. He had called her insufficient, a thoughtless cruelty spoken from a place of privilege and panic. Now those words haunted him, transformed into the foundation of an empire that dwarfed his family's legacy. Meanwhile, in the Park Avenue penthouse, Jasmine and her daughters shared homemade pizza around the kitchen island, dissecting the day's encounter. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Maya asked, always the most concerned with emotional nuance. Jasmine embraced her daughters, these extraordinary young women who had transformed her life. "I believe we did the only thing possible, confronted the past without allowing it to control our future. The choice to know him or not is yours. It always will be." "He's not who we imagined," observed Zora, analytical even in personal matters. "People rarely are," Jasmine replied, "but the true measure of character isn't never making mistakes, but how one responds to them." As the city that never sleeps glittered below them, the four Wilson Johnson women, a formidable quartet forged in adversity and triumph, planned their next steps, not defined by a man's rejection, but by the collective strength they found in each other and the extraordinary journey they had built together. While Marcus Blackwood returned alone to his empty apartment, contemplating everything he had lost, he didn't imagine that the true cost of his rejection 15 years ago would become even clearer in a final public confrontation that would permanently alter how the world viewed both him and the extraordinary family that had flourished without him. The invitation arrived on embossed cardstock, the prestigious Business Leadership Awards logo gleaming in gold foil against cream paper. Jasmine held it in her hands, remembering a time when such an envelope would have seemed as unattainable as the stars. 6 months had passed since the confrontation in her office, 6 months of carefully choreographed quarterly lunches between the Triplets and Marcus, stilted affairs in upscale restaurants where conversation remained superficial and expectations minimal. "They've selected you for Entrepreneur of the Decade," Amara said, unable to contain her excitement as she hovered in the doorway of Jasmine's office. "The ceremony is being broadcast nationally. This is bigger than the Forbes recognition last year." Jasmine nodded, her thoughts not on the accolade but on the inevitable media attention it would bring. For 15 years, she had built her empire with calculated precision, sharing only what served her narrative. This award would invite scrutiny of her entire journey. Perhaps it was time. That evening, as she shared the news with her daughters over dinner, Audrey asked the question Jasmine had been anticipating. "Will you finally tell the whole story? About how we started?" Jasmine set down her fork, studying the three extraordinary young women before her. At nearly 14, they balanced on the cusp of childhood and adulthood, their identical faces reflecting different aspects of the same curiosity. "I've never hidden the truth from you," she replied carefully. "But you've never shared it publicly either," Zora pointed out. The official Phoenix Media Group origin story mentions Eleanor's mentorship, but nothing about the man who rejected us or how we lived before the business succeeded. Maya, always the most intuitive, reached for her mother's hand. "We've been thinking about inviting him to the ceremony. Would that be too difficult for you?" The question hung in the air between them. Jasmine considered deflecting, then remembered her commitment to honesty with her daughters. "Not difficult," she said finally. "Just unnecessary. Marcus Blackwood has no place in our triumph." "That's precisely why we think he should be there," Audrey replied with the precise logic that characterized her thinking. "Not for him, but for you. For closure." The first lunch between Marcus and the triplets had been an exercise in awkwardness. They had chosen an upscale restaurant in Midtown, neutral territory where the maitre d' knew the Wilson Johnson women well enough to provide a private dining area, but not so exclusive that Marcus would feel at home. He had arrived 15 minutes early, nervously adjusting his tie in the restaurant's gleaming surfaces. The girls appeared precisely on time, moving as a coordinated unit that drew admiring glances from other diners. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," he'd begun, his practiced confidence faltering before their identical scrutiny. "We're conducting an experiment," Zora had explained matter-of-factly, "to determine if there's any value in establishing a relationship with our biological progenitor." Marcus had winced at the clinical terminology, but Maya softened the approach. "What my sister means is that we're curious about you, as people, not just as your biological outcome." That first meal had established the pattern for those that followed: polite inquiries about his life, careful questions about the Blackwood family medical history, occasional glimpses of genuine connection when Marcus shared stories about his own childhood insecurities. Never once did they call him father or suggest any desire for emotional attachment. By the fourth lunch, subtle shifts had occurred. The conversation flowed more naturally. Audrey had laughed genuinely at his self-deprecating story about a disastrous sailing expedition. Zora had shown interest in the historical archives of Blackwood Enterprises, suggesting digitization methods to preserve crumbling documents. Maya had shared a recording of her latest composition, accepting his praise with cautious pleasure. It was after this lunch that they extended the invitation. "Our mother is receiving the Entrepreneur of the Decade award," Audrey informed him as they waited for the valet. "We think you should attend." Marcus had stared at them, searching for the trap. "Would she want me there?" "This isn't about what she wants," Zora replied. "It's about what you need to see." "The legacy you missed," Maya added softly. "The empire built from your rejection." The Plaza Hotel ballroom transformed into a glittering showcase of America's business elite for the Leadership Awards. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light over tables adorned with white orchids and gold accents. Network cameras positioned strategically around the room broadcasted to millions of viewers nationwide. Marcus arrived alone, his invitation securing him a table near the back. He had debated declining. The prospect of watching Jasmine celebrated while he sat in anonymous obscurity was daunting, but the triplets' words had haunted him. This was something he needed to witness, a reckoning 15 years in the making. The buzz in the room crescendoed as Jasmine Wilson Johnson arrived with her daughters. They moved through the crowd like royalty, Jasmine resplendent in a structured ivory gown that contrasted magnificently with her dark skin. The triplets flanked her in complementary dresses of deep jewel tones, sapphire, emerald, and amethyst, their identical features accentuated by subtle differences in styling. Marcus watched from a distance, the contrast between this moment and their last encounter 15 years ago painfully stark. The frightened young woman he had dismissed from his penthouse had transformed into this commanding presence while he, once the embodiment of unassailable privilege, now struggled to maintain the facade of success. The ceremony proceeded with practiced elegance. Previous winners spoke glowingly of innovation and perseverance. Video packages highlighted transformative business moments of the decade. When Jasmine's introduction began, the room quieted in anticipation. The screen displayed a montage of Phoenix Media Group's evolution, from a small digital marketing firm to a global technology and media conglomerate. Images of Jasmine through the years showed her transformation from determined entrepreneur to industry titan. The triplets appeared throughout, growing from toddlers playing beneath her desk to poised young women at global product launches. What the video didn't show, what no public narrative had ever included, was the beginning, the rejection, the struggle, the nights of desperation and fear, until now. Jasmine ascended to the stage amid thunderous applause, embracing the presenter before turning to face the audience. The ovation continued for nearly a minute, forcing her to gesture for quiet before she could begin. 15 years ago, she began, her voice steady and clear, someone told me I was insufficient. A ripple moved through the crowd. This was not the typical acceptance speech celebrating mentors and supporters. I was 25 years old, recently graduated from Columbia, and pregnant. When I shared this news with the baby's father, he informed me that I was a Bronx girl with a scholarship degree, who would never belong in his world. He offered me $15,000 to resolve the problem, and showed me the door. Marcus sank lower in his chair as heads turned, searching for reactions. Few knew the details of their connection, but industry whispers had circulated since the business forum confrontation. What that man couldn't see, Jasmine continued, was that in rejecting me, he set me free. Free to define success on my own terms. Free to build something that would have been impossible within the constraints of his world. The camera panned to the triplets, their expressions serene and proud as their mother revealed the foundation of their family story. I won't pretend the journey was easy. There were nights I cried on bathroom floors wondering how I would feed 3 babies on a receptionist's salary. Mornings I chose between paying rent and buying groceries. Days I carried triplet infants to job interviews because I couldn't afford childcare. Jasmine's voice remained strong, though emotion colored her words. But for every door that closed, I built a window. For every no, I created a yes. And for every person who deemed me insufficient, I proved them magnificently wrong. As she detailed Phoenix Media Group's evolution, the early struggles, Eleanor Johnson's mentorship, the technological innovations that revolutionized the industry, Marcus found himself revisiting every assumption he had made about Jasmine. The Bronx girl he had dismissed had possessed more vision, determination, and business acumen than the entire Blackwood dynasty. So I accept this award not as a personal triumph, Jasmine concluded, but as testament to what becomes possible when we refuse to accept other people's limitations. For anyone who has ever been considered insufficient, you are the only one who defines your value. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes, cameras capturing the emotional response of the audience. Marcus remained seated, physically unable to rise, the weight of 15 years of misjudgment pressing him into his chair. After the ceremony, as guests mingled with cocktails and congratulations, Marcus found himself alone on a terrace overlooking Central Park. The night air provided relief from the emotional intensity of the ballroom. He didn't hear the door open behind him. The girls said you might be out here. He turned to find Jasmine, award in hand, the city lights illuminating her profile. Congratulations, he offered inadequately. That was quite a speech. Truth usually makes for compelling oratory, she replied, moving to stand beside him at the railing. I never knew, Marcus said after a moment, about the struggle, the depth of it, how hard it really was. You never asked. The simple response carried no bitterness, only fact. He had never asked, never wondered, never cared enough to consider what happened after he closed his door on her. I will never be able to repair what I did, he said finally, but I need you to know how deeply I regret it, not just because of who you've become, but because of who I was then. Jasmine studied him, seeing for the first time not the man who had broken her heart, but a diminished figure grasping for redemption. I don't carry anger anymore, Marcus. You freed me that day. If you had stayed, if you had done the right thing, I would never have discovered my own strength. I would never have built Phoenix. Our daughters would never have become the extraordinary young women they are. Your rejection was the greatest gift you could have given us, though that doesn't excuse the cruelty of it. Inside, the party continued without them, their daughters watching through the glass with thoughtful expressions. They're remarkable, Marcus said. You've given them everything I couldn't. No, Jasmine corrected. I gave them what you wouldn't. There's a difference. 1 month later, as summer heat blanketed Manhattan, Jasmine and the triplets boarded the Phoenix Media Group's private jet at Teterboro Airport. Their destination was a 2-week vacation on a private island in the Caribbean, their first real break in years. "Did you see the news about Blackwood Enterprises?" Zora asked, showing her tablet to her sisters as they settled into the luxury cabin. The headline was stark: Blackwood Enterprises sold to Chinese conglomerate for 20% of former valuation. "Do you think he'll be okay?" Maya wondered, her compassionate nature emerging. "He'll survive," Jasmine replied, accepting a mimosa from the flight attendant. "The Blackwoods always do." As the jet accelerated down the runway, lifting them into clear blue skies, Jasmine reflected that the abandonment that once seemed to destroy her had been, in fact, the catalyst for an extraordinary life, proving that sometimes being considered insufficient is merely the first step toward becoming absolutely indispensable. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.